We need to talk about the message of Jonathan Cahn in 2015, the Shemitah year, and the mystery of the Shemitah, and the stock market crash that he is so popular now for predicting, that even congressmen are listening to him. The whole world is listening to him. He's one of the most popular speakers in the Christian and even secular Christian world. This supposed Jewish rabbi, although I haven't heard him say anything yet that makes me think he even understands the scriptures. He looks more to me like a salesman, a used car salesman who's been given a fancy product to sell. And so let's look at that. He's relating this Shemitah, rest of the land in Leviticus and Numbers in the Old Testament given to Moses, and applying that now to the modern day stock market crashes. And oh, how convenient that they always crash in the fall and every 7 years, although I think other people have already demonstrated that that's not quite as true as he makes it. They fudge a little bit of timing there so that they can sensationalize the idea that, yeah, every 7 years bubbles blow up, stock markets crash. But what has that got to do with God judging the land, as he properly points out, happened to them in the time of Nebuchadnezzar, when Jeremiah said that for all the years that they didn't let the land rest, God was going to send them into bondage, and that would be 70 years, because there were 70 of those 7-year periods when they didn't let the land rest on the 7th year. So that's 490 years. God's judging them for living in that land, not obeying the law, and letting the land rest, letting the debts be forgiven at the end of the 7 years, and saying that I'm going to judge you and put you in bondage for those 70 years, and let the land rest as it was ordered you to do. So now that's a correct application of the scripture. That's what it was about. And you would imagine for those that are still under the Mosaic law, just like Jesus tells them in the Gospels, I'm not going to judge you, it's Moses that's going to judge you. You say you're following Moses, he told you about me, you don't believe in me, so Moses is the one. You're under his law, you're following him. And so for those people, you might track what goes on every 7 years, but then is that the way God did it with the Israelites? No, it was 490 years later that they had been abusing the 7-year Shemitah, when he then catches up with them and says, okay, now you're going to pay. I've been telling you, I've been warning you, I've been asking you to return to the law that you agreed to for my blessing, but you're not, and so now I'm going to punish you for it. But it didn't seem to come every 7 years as a stock market crash, as a financial disaster. And now, what has that got to do with the Western world who claims to be Christian? I mean, anyone who claims to be Christian is out from under that law, aren't they? Isn't that the whole point of the New Testament? We don't have to be circumcised anymore. We don't have to keep the Sabbath. There remains, Paul says, a Sabbathing, a Sabbath keeping that's in the heart. Because as God said all the way back in Genesis, I'll put my laws in their hearts, and that's where I'll judge them. Well, that became true when the Messiah came and gave his life in love. Now, fulfilling the law of Moses for those that accept this Messiah. And that's why what I find funny about this rabbi, Jonathan Cahn, is not a word comes out of him about the false Messiah that is prophesied throughout Scripture, through Daniel, the people of the prince that shall come. I mean, he talks about Daniel and the nature of the upcoming judgment in Daniel, the desolation of the temple and the 7-year tribulation, which of course he relates to this Shemitah observation. But what about the people of the prince that shall come? How come he's not talking about that? And how come he's not relating the fact that whoever believed in the Messiah is out from under the laws, the Shemitah law as well as the circumcision law. People on Wall Street, our stock market, stockholders who believe in Jesus are not bound by those laws. Don't you know that? Christianity? So I find this to be quite the smokescreen of one kind or another, since he's so well supported. He comes from nowhere. He says nothing that looks like he understands the scriptures intimately. And yet his message is always the same. It's like a stock market. It's like a big financial scare. This has to be the year that the stock market will crash because God's going to do it. Because it's on God's calendar. Yeah, but not for the Christian people, first of all. And nothing of what he's saying is showing me what's been going on every 7 years to the people who are under the Mosaic covenant. Show me what's happening in Israel to the people who claim that they're still waiting for a Messiah. They're the ones who are still under the Mosaic covenant. They're the ones who still have to keep the feast days and let the land lie fallow and keep the Sabbath and give a tenth of their mint, as the Pharisees claimed in Jesus' time, and probably whose hearts are still not in it, just as they weren't in Jesus' time. So this application of Jonathan Cahn seems to be this financial scare. He's like another Alex Jones. He's got enough of the truth to make him sound reliable. And yet the story he's telling, as Jesus said, you should know. You tell a tree by its fruit. What's he saying? Is he saying the Messiah is coming again and the Jews are going to elect a false Messiah and that's what the judgment comes from? No, he's saying he's got some story about the stock market crashing because God's judging the Shemitah observance. But why is he judging it with Christians, and why is nobody talking about the false Messiah, the people of the prince that shall come, that will destroy the city, who is the real result of the tribulation period? If you read the scriptures rightly, it's because they crown another as their Messiah instead of Jesus of Nazareth, who was their Messiah. That's what's coming to the Jews. And all this talk about the land laying fallow and the debts not being repaid, well, we've been off of that for thousands of years, haven't we? I mean, Jesus threw the tables over in the temples when he was there and said, you've turned my father's house into a casino. So so Jonathan Cahn seems to be punking for the man, as my dad used to say. He's leading people down a road of being prepared for a financial crash that can be blamed on God. So yes, is that financial crash coming? I don't know. They're sure spending a lot of money to tell the Christian and religious world that, and make it very popular, that even congressmen are hopping to his tune. So it's scary that perhaps a financial crash is coming and they're going to blame God for it, and we're all going to look to the false Messiah as the answer. Anyway, hope that helps.